Hey, just a quick tip. Say you got some bolts or small parts that you need degreased, cleaned up. I like to put them in a little plastic container like this, something with a sealable lid, so that you can fill it up here with your parts. In this case, you got head bolts in here. Fill it up with crud cutter. It's water-based, I think. Definitely biodegradable. And the best part is it doesn't stink, so you can use it indoors without any problems. Give it a shake every once in a while, just to agitate it. Let it sit. After a while, you have some nice clean stuff. So this video picks up from the end of the electrolysis video. The heads have been removed from the electrolysis bath, and now I'm on to disassembly. Starting here by removing the rockers. Once the rockers are out, move on to the valves. Some of these valves were a little challenging to get out. It took a bit of force to compress the spring and get the valves to actually sit while compressing the valves. Reason for that is because the keepers on some of these valves were locking against the valve locks, thus preventing the compression of the spring without pushing the valve down into the combustion chamber area. I had to tap some of the valves with a hammer just to get the keepers to separate from the locks. A few taps oftentimes will do the trick, but not in every case. For whatever reason, these were putting up a pretty good fight. The rag underneath is supposed to help prevent the valves from being pushed down into the combustion chamber area. So after removing the locks, I dropped them into a little container filled with crud cutter. The idea is just to let them soak in a bath there, clean them up pretty good. So in case you were wondering, yes, this is the second head. That's why there are valves sitting out there in front of the head that I'm working on. So now I'm taking out the valve springs. Now that everything's been compressed, the keepers have been removed. Here I'm cutting out the valve stem seals. It's easier just to kind of cut them with a pair of wire cutters there and pull them off in pieces than it is to try to slide them over the valve stems and the valve stem guides. The intake valve stem seals were a little more challenging to remove because they have a spring on them. So I had to pry them out with some pliers. So now comes the fun part of removing the valves. Some of these valves were so rusted into the valve stem guides that they just couldn't be removed, at least not easily. It took repeated cycles of tapping with a hammer and lots of PB blaster just to get them to budge. But once I got them moving, it wasn't too bad. Just some gentle back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between pushing the valves down, pushing them back up, pushing them down, pushing them back up. Basically just working them back and forth, you know, in and out. And eventually they came free. Once free, of course, it took a lot of cleaning. You can see some of the crud that came out with the valves there. But once they were removed, I used a stiff, bristled, I guess you call it like a barrel brush that you'd use to clean out like a gun barrel. Scrubbed them out real good, the valve stem guides that is, and applied liberal amounts of PB blaster while doing so. And the combination of that really helped clean them out. Pretty solid. This one's coming loose. This just goes to show how stuck some of these valves were. Even tapping with a hammer, they didn't seem to want to come loose. But gradually, with plenty of tapping and lots of lube, they did eventually come free, obviously. But again, it did take a lot of back and forth between constantly tapping, lubrication, tapping, lubrication, moving them back and forth, back and forth. Eventually they did come free. Something else that needs to be fixed is the rocker studs. I don't know if this will come across in the video. See if I can find an angle here. And I'm on the floor, I'm running out of horizontal surfaces. But some of these studs pulled out a little bit. Don't know if... I'm trying to find an angle here that shows what I'm talking about. Now, I'll measure these. It'll be more evident, but let's see. So we've got one that's at, what are we at? 1.329. Damn camera keeps timing out of me. And we'll see that this one is 1 493 thousandths. So this one needs to be pressed in, and I think there was one on the other head that looked slightly off as well. Anyway, I'm just going to ballpark it off of, take a measurement of a few of these. So that's 344 thousandths, 336 thousandths, 334 thousandths, and what do we got here? 348 thousandths, 328 thousandths, 495 thousandths. So that I don't know if that happened while the engine was running, whenever that was. Who knows? I've got no history on the motor. Or if that happened when I was taking out the valve strings, compressing them. Some of the keepers were locked pretty good, so I'd put a lot of pressure on a few of them for the keepers to get loose. I don't know. Regardless, either way, it needs to be fixed. Let's get this lined up a little better. lines up pretty good. Definitely more stable. Let's give this a shot. Contact centered pretty good. Let's see what happens. I can hear the plywood compressing. I think it's going. Yeah, it's going in. Yep. Now I can see with the angle I'm at, pretty much across the top, to see how far down to go. And maybe just a hair lower. I think that's pretty good. Let's see where we're at. Put a straight edge across these. Good to me. See if I can get in here. Pretty good to me. Let's call that done. Look at all the rust built up behind the valves. These two are probably the worst. It's pretty bad inside there and inside there. So, I think what I'll do is maybe give this another soaking in the electrolysis. I really don't want to have to grind all that stuff out. Give it one more cleaning and we'll call them done. So here are the heads after they've dried off. There's still obviously rust, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. There was rust built up, you know, behind the valves, all the way around the intake. I mean, this was encrusted till about, I don't know, maybe all the way up to the valve stem itself, all the way around the side. And the water jacket, let's see if I can get some light here, get a better angle. The water jacket still has some pretty heavy scaling inside. But it's substantially cleaner than it was. I know this still looks bad, but again, tremendously better. And I'm not going to soak these a third time. I think where I'm at, I think I'm comfortable with where I'm at right now. So again, there's still a fair amount of rust inside, but I think a lot of this will just flake off. I've rubbed my finger over some of it and it comes right off. It's pretty brittle. This is all just carbon buildup. This is an exhaust crossover. This head turned out pretty good. It seems the electrolysis doesn't really get into carbon, just breaks off rust. Yeah, this is the really bad one. But again, let's see if I get in here with my finger. And this stuff just kind of flakes right off. So I think with a little bit of effort, I can get most of that out. Well, let's see how this goes. We're getting down to the Bel Air cast iron. Substantial improvement so far. I mean, you can't really tell because of all the dust that fell into this side, but that's down to the Bel Air cast iron. Alright, I got my Scotch-Brite on the bottom of the DA sander. I have a Whizzer, but my AC compressor can't keep up with it, so gotta make do with what I got for now. See what happens. You know, this is far from a machine surface, of course. I mean, there's no substitute for having the heads resurfaced. But again, you know, all things considered, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This motor just isn't worth the money. All right, let's clean out the valve guides once again. So I'm just taking a hex to socket adapter, one that fits in here good enough. Chalk that up. Doesn't really take much, so I'm sure that's good enough. Yeah, maybe just a tad. I'm really not applying any pressure. You don't really need to. But I am pulling back ever so slightly just to get that lapping compound to suck itself back in between the valve and the valve seat. See, if I pull up, suction cup will pull it up. All right, let's see what that got us. And you want to make sure you don't get any of this compound on the valve stem itself or in the valve guide. This is obviously abrasive, so the last thing you want to do is get an abrasive inside of an area like that. Okay. So we'll do a side-by-side comparison. tethered. Hold on. Okay. So there's now a dull gray ring around the circumference of the valve seat. Looks pretty wide, which implies, at least to me, I'm no expert on this, but that would be the width of what we just ground. And you can see a corresponding gray spot all around, well, gray ring. Maybe you can, hold on, I'm trying to get the light to work here with me. Maybe that'll come through on camera, I'm not sure. But compare that to this. You can clearly see a ring on the valve on the left. Well, the exhaust valve here. And you should be able to see the difference in the two valve seats here. So just on the intake, I'll do the exhaust next. And again, I'm no expert on this, so don't take this as a definitive guide on how to lap valves. I just know that this has to seal better than the pitted mess that I had. Remember, a lot of these valves were rusted. They're completely rusted on the back side. Not the exhaust, but the intakes were. And there was some pitting on the valve seats themselves, so. Again, I'm just trying to give this motor a fighting chance. This isn't a high performance motor. This isn't a daily driver. This doesn't have to be reliable. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now this is where we want to make sure that we keep our valves in the exact spot they came from, because we've matched the seat to the back of the valve and its valve face. So here's a before. Let's try to do an after. I don't know if this will suction cup onto this valve. Yeah, that should work. And again, I'm using very, very light pressure. I'm just using basically the weight of the drill to provide pressure. And I like to use the compound sparingly so it doesn't make a mess. The easiest mess is to clean up is the one you don't make, so if I don't make a mess, I've got much less to clean up later. All right, let's give this one a shot. I like to just run my finger around to make sure I don't feel any more grit. And that tells me I've gotten pretty much all of the lapping compound off. Regardless, once I'm done, I'll spray everything down with brake clean just to be certain. The last thing we want is any kind of grit washing into the combustion chamber or into the valve guide and causing premature wear. All right, it's pretty clean. And here's the back side of the valve again. It's the one we just did. Again, there's a slight gray ring which shows the wear pattern created by the lapping compound. So one more thing I like to do so that I don't accidentally put these back in the wrong spot, I'll mark them. Got 1 and 2A, 1 and 2B, 1 and 2C, and 1 and 2D. Now, I didn't have to label them 1 and 2. Obviously, there's only going to be one exhaust and one intake, and they're only going to fit in one spot. Just a force of habit. The Honda I did this on had 4 valves per head, and I believe they're all the same size. So, or at least the intakes were the 2 intakes were the same size and the 2 exhausts were the same size. So it really mattered. Anyway, I'm going to do the same thing for the other head, except those will be E, F, G, and H. Same numbering, 1 through 1 and 2. And that way, when I take these out to clean the heads off again one final time, like I said, I'll spray everything down with brake clean. I want to make sure that I don't lose my letters, first off. But second off, that everything goes back in the spot it came from, because I just lapped the valves. And they're lapped per individual combustion chamber that they came from. So I want to keep everything together when I go to put them all back together. Well, here's where we stand after a final brake clean. And if you didn't know any better, you might think this head was machined. I think it turned out pretty good, especially the valve seats. So, time to put this one together, and I'll be ready to put on a block. Sprayed everything down with brake clean, and put some WD-40 up here on the top end, just to keep it from flash rusting. Some of these valve guides were horribly rusted, so I want to make sure they're good and clean. I've already run the valves through several times with some oil. Made sure I cleaned them out as best I could. Lubricated them just to make sure they didn't scratch. And I think we're ready to go. Make sure I get the head oriented the right way, so that I put the valves back in the right order. Took a picture before I washed everything down. And sure enough, E through H. All right. Also marked my board I just took a 2x4, drilled some holes in it for the valves, and labeled them A through D and E through H. So I'll put this in front of me. Now it's almost impossible to screw up. Except, well, no. I was going to say I should put the valve seats in, the valve stem seals first. But I want to make sure that I don't have any more binding on these valves before I put them in for the last time. And get everything nice and clean. Should just drop right into place. Again, make sure nice and clean. I've already sprayed these down with brake clean as well. That's why they're not marked anymore. Made sure I got any residual valve lapping compound off. Try to distribute that oil in there, the valve guide. And keep in mind, some of these valves were so stuck inside the valve guides that they actually had to be hammered out. Gently, of course, but nevertheless, with penetrating oil and a lot of working back and forth. Now they operate like butter. I mean, they close under their own weight. Didn't do anything special, just cleaned them up. Cleaned up the valves, valve stems, the valve guides. Brushed them out several times. Made sure there's no more residual rust. Cleaned everything down with brake clean a few times. Here we are. Nothing special. Alright, can I do this without dropping the valves? Good enough. Put a drop of lube. On each guide, just to try and prevent damaging the seals when I put them on. Very, very light. I'm going through the exhaust first. Just little umbrellas. They don't have a spring on them. try it without that sleeve. And just a little bit of lube tip here. Yeah, it's much better. Remember, it's just exhaust, exhaust, exhaust. Definitely want some lube on there. One more. Just so I don't forget later, I'll grab these O-rings, set them out. And we'll do the intake. I'm going to screw this up. That's pretty good. Just take a socket and tap these in. Until I seat, and we're good to go. Drop lube on there. Better. Grab these O-rings too so I don't forget. I'm sure there's no difference between the intake and the exhaust O-rings, but whatever, the bags that came in, so that'll be what I'm using. Grab my springs. These are already lubed. These were exhaust. Got my keepers. And I'm gonna have to stuff a rag under here just to hold the valves up. good. I don't know if I'm low enough to get that O-ring in. Can you go any lower? Let's try it. Sort of. I think that's good. Keepers. So the idea is to hold these keepers in. I'll hold them with my needle nose, because sometimes when you release the valve spring compressor, they tend to want to just shoot off. So let's try to prevent that from happening. So far so good.